Chase Briscoe signed a multi-year contract extension with Stewart Haas Racing. Casey Mears is interested in returning to NASCAR, and NASCAR did a muffler test at Phoenix yesterday. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Firmware Motorsports, as Firmware Motorsports had a couple pretty big sponsor announcements in the last couple days. First, Boot Barn has extended their partnership with Firmware Motorsports, and they will continue to sponsor Todd Gillen, Michael McDowell, and also Zane Smith in multiple races this season. Really great to see that Boot Barn will continue their partnership with Firmware Motorsports and will continue to sponsor them this season. It was also announced yesterday or a couple days ago that Georgia Peanuts is going to continue sponsoring Todd Gillen in 2023 for multiple races as well. They're going to sponsor, I think, 2 or 3 races this season for Todd Gillen. So great to see that they are going to continue doing that. Glad to see that they are back, and good to see that they will continue to sponsor them in 2023. Happy to see that they are going to be returning in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Circle. As it was announced yesterday, that Circle is going to continue to sponsor Daniel Hemrick for 14 races in 2023 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Circle sponsored Daniel Hemrick for quite a few races in 2022, so glad to see that they're returning to sponsor Daniel Hemrick, and good to see that they are returning. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Worldwide Express. As it was announced this morning that Worldwide Express is going to continue sponsoring Trackhouse in 2023 for 21 races. They'll sponsor Ross Chastain for 19 races, and they'll sponsor Daniel Suarez for 2 races. Worldwide Express has become a pretty big partner with the Trackhouse brand. Glad to see that they're returning, and glad to see that Trackhouse continues to keep their sponsorship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Solomon Plumbing. As it was announced this morning that Solomon Plumbing is going to continue sponsoring Brad Keselowski in 2023 for 4 races. They've expanded their partnership. I think they only sponsored 2 or 3 races last year, so they're going to be sponsoring Keselowski for more races this season. Very happy to see that they will continue sponsoring, and glad to see that they get to return to sponsor in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cabo Wabo. As it was announced on Tuesday that Cabo Wabo is going to become NASCAR's first official tequila sponsor. Cabo Wabo is a pretty big tequila brand, so glad to see that they're joining NASCAR and becoming a sponsor in that essence. There's rumors that Daniel Suarez could be sponsored by them. That's not been confirmed, but there's a chance that they could sponsor them in 2023. Good to see that Cabo Wabo will be part of NASCAR, and glad to see that they're joining. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NYSC. Now, multiple NASCAR drivers and people higher up in the industry, including Steve Phelps, Jeff Gordon, Daniel Suarez, Chase Elliott, and Ryan Blaney, were at the New York Stock Exchange. And basically, they were there to welcome NASCAR in celebration of the 75th season. Obviously, this is the 75th season in NASCAR Cup Series history and in NASCAR history in general. So it's a big year overall, and I think it's really good to see that there was a really awesome welcoming party and welcoming committee for that. I think that's really great to see and cool to see that they are basically working with NASCAR. I think that's exciting to see that NASCAR was with the New York Stock Exchange. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dover Motor Speedway. As it was announced on Monday that Dover Motor Speedway has announced a new Big Bounce America. It's a 900-foot square, basically, amusement park kind of thing, quintessentially, bounce castle, all that kind of stuff, is going to be at Dover Motor Speedway. I think this is a really cool thing and initiative that Dover is doing. Very happy to see that they're part of that, and glad to see that they're doing that here this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about F1. As Ben Suleiman, basically it was reported by multiple reporters that Ben Suleiman has caused astonishment when he said F1 is not worth $20 billion. And F1 is threatening to basically sue the FIA currently at this moment. It's going to be very interesting to watch to see what happens in regards to this because Ben Suleiman basically, I think, has really good interest in trying to make Formula 1 a better sport currently at the moment. Of course, trying to bring new manufacturers in. He's against Saudi Arabia, quintessentially, which I think that's a good thing, honestly. And there's a lot of other things that he's currently against at the moment, which I'm definitely stand for. So, really interesting to see what will happen in regards to this, because I think it's something to watch for sure. And we'll see what happens going forward. So I think it's definitely very interesting, and we'll see what happens going forward in regards to that, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Raymond Brothers Racing. As it was announced on Tuesday that the Raymond Brothers Racing organization is going to be moving away from Chevy and doing multiple manufacturers, and they will be partnering with Ford for the full 2023 season. It was also announced that Mason Massey is going to drive that first one of their cars in 2023. Mason Massey began his NASCAR career basically driving for the Raymond Brothers Racing organization, so it's basically a welcoming home and bringing him back. I think Mason Massey is a very solid driver, and I think he'll do a really good job. One of the reasons why I think Raymond Brothers Racing is moving over to work with Ford is because, of course, of Team Haysburg's, and Josh Ream is kind of part of that Team Haysburg's organization, so that's why they're partnering up with Ford heading into the 2023 season. The hope is that this team could really improve. They haven't been a team that's really showed a lot of progress and speed on the racetrack, but I think bringing Mason in will really help the team. Glad to see that Mason is going to be full-time with the organization this season. I think he'll do as good a job as he can. I hope he can, because it would be really good for the sport, and hopefully we'll see him do a really good job this year with them. I think he'll do as good as he can. Hopefully Mason can have a good run, some good runs. I think a couple top 20s would be really solid for the team. Hopefully they can finish all the races and make every single race in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR and Chicago. As the 2023 Chicago Festival has been officially revealed and the artists have been revealed. So the 4 artists that are going to be performing at the Chicago Festival are as follows: the Chainsmokers, Miranda Lambert, the Black Crowes, and Charlie Crockett. Chainsmokers known for big songs like Closer and Paris, among other songs that they have done in the past. They are basically going to be performing, so a lot of people know who the Chainsmokers are. Glad to see that they're going to be performing. Miranda Lambert, one of the biggest female country artists in history, she'll be performing as well. She's got a really big fan base and a really big crowd. She'll be able to bring a lot of people in. The Black Crowes are probably the least relevant people on this list, in my opinion. The Black Crowes have not really had any big hits in a long time, but they're known for songs like Go Faster, which is known by a lot of people in NASCAR. I would say they're known for songs like She Talks to Angels and Hard to Handle That Cover. They've made some great music. And finally, Charlie Crockett. Charlie Crockett is one of the biggest upcoming country stars, in my opinion. He's got a song called Welcome to Hard Times, which I think is one of my favorite songs of his, and he's got that New Orleans-style country music, which I really love that kind of sound. I think it's really great to see that they're doing this, bringing in different artists. It's a very interesting lineup they have, but glad to see the NASCAR is branching out and going for some more of the relevant artists. I think that's a good thing for sure. Very happy to see this and glad to see that these people will get an opportunity to perform at the festival. I think that's exciting, and I think that's great to see, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. As it was announced the last couple days that Chase Elliott is going to be racing in Speedfest this upcoming weekend at Cordell Speedway. There's a lot of drivers who will be competing in Speedfest. William Byron will be there. William Sawalich is going to be there. David Reagan's going to be there. And there's a lot of other drivers who are going to be part of this event. Really happy to see that Chase Elliott is going to be part of Speedfest, bringing his name. There's going to be people that will show up because of that. Of course, Chase Elliott, who is a Georgia native, will compete in the Cordell Speedway. If you're going to be there, hope you can go out there and enjoy that event, because it would definitely be really exciting if Chase Elliott go out there and win. Hope we can do a really good job in that event and make Georgia proud and go out there and win, because I think that would be really exciting and really great to see, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Dillon. As it was announced yesterday that Ferris Motors is going to continue sponsoring Ty Dillon in 2023 at Firmware Motorsports. It was also announced that Ty Dillon is going to drive the 3-car for Rich Childs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It's unclear how many starts he will make, but he will be able to only make up to 5 starts in the 2023 season, as drivers in the Cup Series with 3 or more years of experience are only allowed to run up to 5 races. So that's the only time we're going to see the 3-car, because there have been questions about how many races that we're going to see that 3-car, and maybe if Kyle Busch was going to get an opportunity. But Richard said at the press conference when the Ferris Motors announcement was made that they were only going to run that car for Ty Dillon this season. So people wondering about Kyle Busch getting into the ride, that is not going to happen. That being said, though, I'm glad to say that Ty Dillon is going to get an opportunity to make some Xfinity Series starts this year. I think Ty will actually do better in the Xfinity Series than he will do in the Cup Series, because I'm going to be honest and for real, I'm not expecting Ty Dillon to do really that good in the Cup Series this year, but maybe he'll get some Xfinity Series wins this year. Glad to see the 3-car is coming back. We obviously saw it last year with Jeffrey Earnhardt, and I'm happy to see the 3-car is returning in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Wishing Ty Dillon the best of luck. Hopefully he does a really good job in that ride. If he can, I think that would be really, really exciting. And hopefully Ty Dillon can do a really good job in that ride, because I think it'd be really great for the team and also really good for the sport if he can do a great job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Greg Gaulling. As it was announced last night that Greg Gaulling is returning to SS Greenlight Racing in 2023 on a full-time basis, driving the 08 car. Sponsorship will be announced later today, but he is returning full-time to SS Greenlight Racing. This, in my opinion, is really awesome and really incredible to see. Greg Gaulling has driven for SS Greenlight Racing in the past, back in 2019, and while the field was not as competitive in 2019 as I expected it to be in 2023, Greg Gaulling always got the best out of that equipment. I remember when he finished second at Talladega, and he nearly actually made the playoffs in 2019, where he finished 13th from the points in an SS Greenlight Racing car. I think Greg Gaulling is one of the most underrated drivers. I know when he was up and coming, he wasn't the greatest, but he didn't really get the best advice. And ever since he's gotten really good advice, he's really improved as a driver and has kind of come into his own as a driver in this series. And I think he's going to do a really good job in this car. My expectation is he'll finish top 20 in the points. He'll get SS Greenlight Racing maybe an outside shot to make the playoffs. I think that's going to be a stretch this year, considering that the field in Xfinity is really stacked this year. But I do think that he will do a very good job in that car. I expect him to do really solid, and I think he will have a very good year in that car this year. So wishing him the best of luck, and glad to see that he's returning to the Xfinity Series to drive that car. I think he has some really strong performances. I think he does a really good job, and I think he'll do a great job in that 08 car in 2023. I expect him to do a great job, and I think he will. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Wallace Allen. As it was announced this morning that Wallace Allen will be returning to Nice Motorsports in 2023, driving the number 45 car. Let's be honest about Wallace Allen. Wallace Allen did not do great with the team last year, but I will say that Nice Motorsports was really stretched thin this past year. They had at points 5 trucks on the racetrack. There's talk that maybe only we'll have 2 or 3 trucks this year, so we know Carson Osbar, of course, will be returning to the 42 truck in 2023. And let's be honest, I think Nice does put a lot better equipment in Carson Osbar's trucks, but I will say that he should have formed definitely a lot better last year. But I'm going to give him another chance to really show if he can improve this year, because Wallace Allen, I think, has a little bit of talent. I don't think he's a fantastic driver by any stretch of imagination, but I do think that Nice has shown that they've been a little bit stretched too thin. They had 4 full-time trucks last year, which I think really hurt their organization. Last year, the only driver that really performed at that team was Carson Hocevar, and at points when the Cup guys like Chastain and Daniel Suarez came into the team. I think Wallace will do as good as he can. He definitely is going to have to show some improvement this year, because I think this really is going to be one of his last chances. I know he's still young, so he's got time. And he's only 22, he'll be 23 this year. But he's really got to show some signs of improvement this year, because, again, I was not really impressed with Wallace Allen in 2022. So he's got to show some signs of improvement. Hopefully come in here and do a much better job, because, like I mentioned and said, he's going to have to show some pretty big signs of improvement and really start impressing me, because, again, he didn't really impress me this past year. Hopefully he can do a better job, and we'll see if he can do a better job here and do a better job with this team, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the upcoming TV deal and NASCAR's upcoming revenue deal that is going to be coming up here in the next few weeks. There was a report that was made by Jim Utter from Motorsports.com, or someone at Motorsports.com, talk about the upcoming deal. And basically, we've got kind of an update on the deal. Back in October, tensions are really, really building behind the scenes when it came to the TV deal, because a lot of the people who were part of basically the RTA were very, very frustrated with NASCAR. People like Jeff Gordon, Steve Newmark, Dave Alpern, Denny Hamlin, among other people, were very, very frustrated. Curtis Polk, actually, were very frustrated with the revenue deal that they were getting. It sounds like discussions are going on at the moment, and it sounds like there is a very good possibility that things could be starting to head in the right direction. And it sounds like, according to Steve Newmark, that there is at least a little bit more optimism than pessimism. That's a really good sign, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing 2311 Racing beginning to go ahead and start building on their new project and building their new garage and their new shop that hopefully will be done in 2024. I think that's one of the reasons why you're starting to see that, and I think that's at least a really positive thing to see overall. They're working towards that at this particular moment. We'll see what the revenue stream is. The teams want more money, and hopefully NASCAR can give them a lot more money going forward. It will be definitely something to watch for sure as we do get closer to the start of the season. It's definitely one thing to keep an eye on, one thing to watch, and we'll see what happens when it comes to this upcoming deal if things do satisfy and get better going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. As it was announced yesterday that Chase Elliott will drive the 35 for McAnally-Hilgeman Racing in the opening race at Daytona International Speedway. The reason that Chase Elliott is driving the number 35 truck is because of a couple reasons. Number one, Jake Garcia does not turn 18 years old to the Las Vegas weekend. Therefore, he's not eligible to run at the Daytona International Speedway, though he will be eligible to run for the championship. It still has been declared to run a playoff waiver. Another reason why Chase Elliott is driving his 35 truck is the Gate Hydraulics sponsorship. Gate Hydraulics is part of the Napa branding, and of course, McAnally-Hilgeman Racing has a big partnership with the Napa branding, so it makes a lot of sense why Chase Elliott is driving the 35 truck. I know a lot of people have been frustrated over the years about the fact that we've seen drivers from the Cup Series come down and run truck and Xfinity Series races. If you want my honest opinion, I think only running a few races or one race is really not that big of a deal anymore. I used to be frustrated as a fan about that. But over the years, I've kind of grown away from being frustrated about that. So if he's only running one or two races, I'm definitely okay with it. And glad to see that he's getting an opportunity to run in the Truck Series. Again, it's just Daytona. It's not like he's running for like a big upcoming race or nothing like a playoff race because, again, they're not eligible to run races. And they're only allowed to run a few select races anyways, and you have the restrictions. So I have no problem with it. I think the expectation for Chase Elliott is he's going to be a contender in this race. He's a really solid and really strong super speed racer. So I think he'll do a really, really good job, and I think he's definitely for sure going to get the best out of the equipment. So I think he does a really good job, and we'll see if Chase Elliott can be competitive, but I think he will for sure 100% be competitive. So good luck to Chase Elliott, and we'll see if he can go out there and win that truck race. I think he will be a contender, and we'll see if he can win the opener for the Truck Series and maybe go on to win the Daytona 500 and also win the opening truck race as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about day 2 of the next-gen test. Now, obviously, yesterday and the last couple days, NASCAR has been testing the next-gen car. Day number 1 was more of a test to try to test some short-track components. Day number 2, there were more tests on the short-track components as it was mainly a muffler test. NASCAR is planning to use mufflers in 2 of the upcoming races, that being the Clash next weekend and also at the Chicago Street Course. And NASCAR tested mufflers yesterday. There basically was a video that basically surfaced. Bob Pockers did a lot of videoage from that, so shout out to him for basically putting out those videos. And I will say, the sounds of the mufflers, it really doesn't take much away from the sound, but it basically will not make your ears hurt. And if they're using it to basically, the reason that they're using mufflers is for 2 races because they want to go to more urban areas. And even Dale Jr. commented on us and said if this is a way for us to get back to the National Fairgrounds, the better it is going to be. Another thing that was tested was actually a smaller spoiler. On day number 1, NASCAR tested a 2.5-inch spoiler. This test had actually a 2-inch spoiler, so a much smaller spoiler. There were drivers that saying yesterday that they were wanting even a smaller spoiler, maybe not even a spoiler at all. But the reason that they're testing a smaller spoiler is to try to make the racing a lot better on the short tracks and road courses because, let's be honest, the road course and short track racing in 2023 was really, 2022 actually, was not that good. So they're hoping that with these changes that the racing could genuinely improve in 2023. In addition to that, they actually removed parts of the diffuser on the bottom of the car as well, which means maybe there'll be less drag on the back of the car and basically we'll be able to create better racing overall because they don't want to make these cars too easy to drive. They want to make it to where it's not too difficult, but they also want to make it too easy. They just want it right in the middle where talent can really matter on these racetracks. So there was other stuff that was announced that mufflers are going to be used in the Clash, like I mentioned, but work has to be done for Chicago. One of the biggest concerns is the heat issues. Heat had become a major issue at this test, and drivers are very scared, and they want changes to be made. Chris Bell talked about that, some of the positive changes in NASCAR heading in the right direction, and Bragg Zossi kind of said the same thing, that the heat issues do need to be resolved. I do want to say one thing about NASCAR. You've got to give them credit where credit's due. And the fact that they are testing these issues to fix these problems while they could have been done a little bit earlier, you've got to get the short track package really, really good. And I have to give NASCAR props for trying to make the racing as good as they can, because we want racing to be better for everybody. And I'm glad to say they did test these mufflers. I have no problem with them using in a couple races. And honestly, if they use it at Bristol and stuff, it wouldn't have mattered. And let's be honest with ourselves, if NASCAR had said they didn't say anything about it, no one would have noticed and no one would have cared. But that's just my honest opinion. There are things that they 100% are going to have to work on. And I trust NASCAR. They'll try to fix those problems and get everything resolved in the future. So we'll see what happens going forward. And glad to say that they were trying to fix and resolve these problems. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Casey Mears. Now, Casey Mears, of course, was spotted at the Next Gen test. We talked about this yesterday. He actually got to be interviewed by Cole Cusimoro, who was actually at that Next Gen test. And Casey Mears says that he actually wants to return to NASCAR. Casey Mears actually wants to reach 500 NASCAR Cup Series starts in his career and is actually hoping to do an 11-race schedule maybe in 2023 and wants to return for 11 races to reach 500 NASCAR Cup Series starts. The last time that Casey Mears raced in the NASCAR Cup Series was actually back in 2019 in the Daytona 500, driving the number 27 car for Premium Motorsports. If you want my honest opinion, do I think Casey Mears was a really great driver in the NASCAR Cup Series? No, Casey Mears did not perform the greatest in my honest opinion. But he didn't always have the greatest equipment in the world. Yes, I know that he drove for Hendrick Motorsports and drove for Ganassi and drove for some very solid teams and didn't always put up great performances. But one thing he did that a lot of other drivers can't say they've done at this point is actually won a NASCAR Cup Series race, and he also won NASCAR Xfinity Series race back in 2006 as well. So Casey Mears does have wins, and also he's got the Mears family as well. Now, the big question would be, if he is to return in 2023, what team would he go for? Well, I think it's pretty obvious what team he would probably go to. I would have to think it'd be Legacy Motor Club. A lot of you are going to think I'm crazy for saying that. Well, he was at the test. He was with Jimmy Johnson. He's great friends with Jimmy Johnson, and we know the 84 car is going to run select races. I would have to imagine that he probably talked to Jimmy about this, probably talked to Richard Petty, probably talked to Mike Beam, probably talked to the other people or higher-ups at that team. Mark Gallagher probably talked to those guys, and he's probably talking about wanting to make a return with Legacy Motor Club, which would be a very solid team to go to. Now, Casey Mears would probably have to do an elite test or a different type of test because, like I said, he has not raced in the Cup Series and he's not raced in the Next Gen era. So he'd have to get probably an elite test or some sort of testing in order to get approved to run. But it would be really cool for him to return. I have no problem with him returning. And we've seen a lot of drivers over the last couple of years who've been coming back for one-off NASCAR starts. Look at Greg Biffle. Greg Biffle returned after basically being gone for like 6 or 7 years last year and drove for NY Racing. And there's still a possibility that he could return in 2023. We've seen other drivers come back. Boris Said's made a couple returns. Paul Menard's returned to the Truck Series. We've seen other drivers come back for a couple returns in their careers. And I'll be honest here, I think it would be pretty cool to see Casey Mears get an opportunity to get maybe a few more select starts and run 11 races. It's really not that harmful, and I wouldn't have a problem with him running just a select schedule because it'd be cool for him to get an opportunity in a pretty solid car. I would think that if he ran, though, he wouldn't run fantastic, but maybe, just maybe, we're going to see Casey Mears get an opportunity to drive in the Cup Series once again, which I think would be really, really exciting. So we'll have to see how far this goes and see if this actually does end up happening, but it sounds like he's talking to teams about potentially doing that, and we'll see if he does actually try to make a return to NASCAR. I think it'd be pretty exciting, but we'll have to see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As it was just announced this morning that Chase Briscoe has signed a multi-year contract extension with Stewart Haas Racing. He will continue to drive the number 14 car for many, many more years to come. Chase Briscoe is one of the first dominoes to fall for the silly season of drivers that have not been signed at this point for 2024. But if you want my honest opinion, I'm not shocked or surprised that Chase Briscoe is returning to Stewart Haas Racing in 2024 and for many, many years to come. Chase Briscoe absolutely deserves it. In 2022, while statistics really don't prove it, didn't have a fantastic year outside of winning at Phoenix, he did actually make it to the round of 8 and had a really strong playoff run and got 5 or 6 of his top 10s in the season actually in the playoffs, which he ran very solidly and ran pretty well in the playoffs. I think Chase Briscoe is one of the most talented drivers currently at the moment, and I think he's 100% the future of Stewart Haas Racing. And I think once Kevin Harvick does officially retire at the end of this year, I think he is going to become the leader of the team and might become the veteran of the team because there's also talk about Eric Almirola's future being uncertain at the moment. But I think, like I said, it makes 100% a ton and a lot of sense for him to return to the scene because, like I said, I think he's performed very solidly. And I think over the next few years, because I think he'll be there probably till the end of the decade at least, he is going to lead this team to many, many wins. And maybe, just maybe, he will lead to this team to a NASCAR Cup Series championship in the future. And in 2022, I do think 2023, I think he's going to at least win one race. I think he'll get a win. And he's got good sponsors and funding. Pretty much all the sponsors that Briscoe had last year, Mahindra, Mobil 1, Rush Truck Centers, is going to continue sponsoring him this season. So he's got sponsorship and funding backing him going forward. Because, like I said, I'm not surprised he was returning to this team because he's got that sponsorship funding from Mahindra. Plus, Tony really likes Chase Briscoe, and basically Chase looked up to Tony. So it makes a lot of sense to keep him in the long run. So I think this is a great move overall for the team. And I think, like I said, he absolutely deserves this extension with this organization. I think he's going to do a really good job. I think he wins quite a few races in the next few years, and I think he'll do a really good job carrying the banner and carrying the brand for Stewart Haas Racing long term. And I think he's, like I said, I think he's going to do a great job continuing really having a lot of success with the team. But there's now other questions to be asked. What happens to the rest of the Stewart Haas lineup with Briscoe being extended? We still have 3 rides that could be potential open. You've got the 4 car that could be open. You've got the 10 car that could be open and the 41 car. Now, the 4 car is already open, and there's a lot of drivers who could drive for that car. You've got the 10 car that could be open because Eric Almirola might retire at the end of the year, and you've got the 41 car that could be open because Ryan Preece might move around. Here's what I predict at this point. I think Ryan Preece moves to the 4 car next year. I've kind of predicted that for a little bit now, but I think Preece takes over the 4 car. That's probably what's going to happen there. The 10 car, if Eric Almirola retires, I think Riley Hurst could get the opportunity to drive that car. And finally, I think the 41 will probably go to Cole Custer. But what if Riley Hurst doesn't get chosen? And what if maybe Haley Deegan or Alex Bowman perhaps, or maybe Ross Chastain gets chosen to drive that 10 car? That can't be something to not think about. And I know that Ford probably wants to move a driver like Haley Deegan already up to the Cup Series. I don't think she's anywhere close to being ready to jump up to the Cup Series in any shape or form at this particular moment. But you know Ford is going to want to move her up, and they're going to try to move her up as quick as possible. It wouldn't shock me and surprise me if she does in some shape or form decide to move up here in the future. But going back and talking about Chase Briscoe, like I mentioned already, Briscoe had an incredible Xfinity season in 2020. He's done pretty solid. I know that performance hasn't been great the 2 years, though he did make the round of 8. But I do think Chase Briscoe is an extremely talented driver, and I think he's really going to be able to help out Stewart Haas Racing become a very solid organization for many, many years to come. And I think he'll do a great job helping the team. If you want a kind of a prediction for Chase Briscoe going forward, I think Chase Briscoe is going to win quite a few races. I think by the end of this decade, he'll be a double-digit time winner, and I think there's a good chance that he could win a Cup Series championship in the next 10 years because I think he's going to really try to help Stewart Haas Racing become a much better team. Because they're going to need a leader here in the future because a lot of their veterans are on the way out currently at the moment. But Briscoe is getting up there in age. Briscoe, I think, will be 28 or 29 this year. So Briscoe's not a really young driver. He's kind of an older driver and will, I think, in the future become this leader of Stewart Haas Racing because he's going to have to step up and become that leader. I expect in 2023 Briscoe to be a contender. I don't know if he'll make the playoffs. In fact, I don't think he makes the playoffs this year. I think SHR is going to somewhat fall off a little bit in performance, but it's not going to be on Briscoe. I think SHR right now has been kind of not the best team over the last couple of years. And with Harvick retiring, there's going to be a lot of focus on that and trying to find a driver to get into that 4 car, which I think likely will go to Ryan Preece next year. We'll see what happens going forward, but I'm happy to see that Chase Briscoe is returning to Stewart Haas Racing, and I think he'll do a really fantastic and great job with the team. Congratulations to Chase Briscoe on getting the ride for 2023. I think he'll do a good job long-term, and I'm glad to see that Briscoe stays long-term with the team because I expected this, but glad to see that Briscoe continues to drive the 14 car. I think he does a great job and will make the 14 car a really strong car heading into the long-term future and make the 14 car as good as it used to be when Tony Stewart drove that car and also Clint Bowyer drove that car for many years. So, that is today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are below that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about Chase Briscoe getting a long-term extension with Stewart Haas Racing? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel, including the possibility of Casey Mears returning to NASCAR? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have everything else I did not cover in today's video on the channel talking about that. Saturday is probably going to be a special video coming out in the morning. And then Sunday, of course, we're going to have the race review for the Rolex 24 once that race does conclude. And we're going to have a lot of content coming out this week as we're getting really close to the start of the season. Next week is the Clash. Racing's back this weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.